So, welcome to 5 Steps to Start Homeschooling. I'm Janine, I'm a mom of 6, and I'm super excited to be here and just jump in on this material. Let's go. So, tonight I'm going to show you how to start homeschooling in just 5 easy steps, have more confidence as your child's best teacher, and have more peace in your day and enjoy the learning process. So, I really wish that people didn't see homeschooling as so hard. I mean, it is hard, but it's not, okay? It doesn't have to be as hard as people make it. I know it really does look pretty on Instagram, but you don't need a big budget. You don't need a traditional schoolroom. You don't need tons of curriculum. And let me tell you, one of the biggest mistakes was trying to have everything planned out and not allowing my curriculum plans to be flexible, causing unnecessary tantrums and meltdowns. And you know what that leads to, right? It leads to giving up. So I don't want you to give up. I want you to be in it for the long haul. I have some of those, I hear some of those stories where they start homeschooling and it just wasn't for them. I don't want you guys to feel that way or to put yourself in that position. So I think homeschooling is so important for your family, for your kids, and for our whole society. But I'll talk more about that later. So let's get started and talk about these amazing steps that are going to make it so easy for you guys and so much more enjoyable. So after this homeschool class, I would like you to start homeschooling right away. I want you guys to feel more motivated and excited about the year, and this is going to take sticking around and listening to the whole class. Make sure that you are Xing out of those other windows, that you put away your cell phones and don't get on Facebook. Maybe have the kids watch an educational show or something so that you can really focus and get in on this and dive in, okay? So if you're just now joining us, so I just want to introduce myself really quick. I'm the mother of 6. This is all my kids, as you can see. The oldest is Audrey. She's right next to me, and my youngest I'm holding. This was a little while ago. So my youngest is now 1, and my oldest is now 11. I've been educating children for 12 years, working in preschools, daycares, tutoring, and leading a local Learn to Read class in my community center. However, I do come from a public school background. That is all that I knew. It was ingrained in me. And then I met my husband. Dun, dun, dun. And he had a myriad of experiences. And one was at an elite prep school in Virginia. And that really opened his eyes to a whole different kind of education. And from that point on, he knew that he didn't want us to send our kids to public school. But he wanted a big family. So sending each one of them to private school was going to be a little bit hard. It was going to be a little unrealistic, right? That's when we researched homeschooling, and that was about 8 years ago, or 9 years ago now. And the reason I felt that we have done so well and that we have really thoroughly enjoyed our journey is because because of that research that we've done, our approach to homeschooling is very different from so many people that we've met and who we've seen on social media. So before I go any further, I just want to say that if you are on a scale of, so from a scale from 1 to 10, if you are on a 1 with your, oh, I won't, I'm thinking about homeschooling. If you're at a 1, and you don't really want to homeschool, but you're curious about the reasons to homeschool, or maybe you're a 5, you're on the fence, and then maybe you're a 10, you're 100% in it. You really want to homeschool. I just want to know, I want you guys to get that, to think about where you are on that scale and just get it in your head as we go forward, okay? So the steps I'm going to share today are what I constantly hear from homeschoolers on what they wish they would have known before they started. Okay, before we learn about starting to homeschool, I really want to give you some background on public school. This is for those of you who are kind of like on a 1, a 5, like a 5 or lower scale, okay? A lot of you are thinking about homeschooling because there's something that you don't like about public schools. And you're not sure about sending your kids there. So what I'm going to share with you are some statistics that I found, but I want you to think about it in a common sense sort of way. If you think about going to like a new restaurant and you try a new dish you've never had before and it isn't very good, okay? It's not something that you want to go back there and choose to eat again. But let's say you go and ask for the recipe. Does that sound really dumb? Of course it is. Now, you might be one of those people who did really well in school and you actually liked school. I was one of those people. I did fairly well. And you might think, maybe you think you turned out okay, so it couldn't have been that bad. Well, I'll get into that more later, but guess what might have played a huge factor in your success? Can you guys guess? How about your parents? Or an adult you looked up in your life that was your mentor? Think about those kinds of things when you are looking at your own success in school, if you had that. Okay, so let's look at some averages and other factors in our education system that will help your decision and also help you in your homeschool journey. Okay, here are some statistics about the academic side of school, and please don't get caught up in these because they're really not as important as other things I'm going to point out. But let's just look at these numbers for a second. It says 34% of children entering kindergarten lack the basic skills needed to learn to read. So that means that 66% have all the skills that they need to read. But then let's look at the next number, and we see that 65% of fourth graders read below grade level. So that means half of the kids that were prepared, they were on track, ready to learn to read, are now behind in reading. What is going on there? That's 50% of the kids that were ready are now behind. And according to this chart, they don't ever catch up. They continue to lag behind, and that results in 8,000 students dropping out of school every day, as well as 93 million adults that come out of school, and it's like they weren't educated past the fourth grade. I mean, how do you guys feel about that? That makes me feel that something is wrong, right? So you could have been doing a great job with your kids at home, getting them all ready for school, and they have all the skills they need to learn to read, and then there's a 50% chance that they will fall behind. That's horrendous. Yikes, right? But guess what? I don't even care about that. These are standardized tests, and those can't always measure success, right? Academics isn't everything. So let's look at some other aspects of our country that our education is not up to par on. Let's talk about debt. Americans are horrible at this part, okay? They trade almost exclusively in debt. This is the average American family. This is showing the picture of the family debt. And people think we are doing really well because we have all these things and we have all these conveniences, but we aren't. We don't own our homes. We don't own our cars. We borrow to get what we want. And this isn't normal. This creates the perfect storm. Okay, this isn't healthy. So our schools aren't helping in this area. They give kids almost no financial education. And when children graduate from high school, they don't know anything about a budget. They don't know how to invest. They know nothing about buying a home. And I say that because I was that person. I didn't know what to expect when I got out on my own. I didn't realize how many bills there were and what interest rates they were charging me on my school loans. My husband bought our first house before we were married, and he wasn't really shown the breakdown of the payment on the mortgage per month. And so on the closing, he was like, wait a minute, I thought I could afford this before, but now I see all this extra stuff on there. But he just signed it anyways. And that could have been a really bad thing. He could have gotten in big trouble when the market crashed. Luckily, he had an okay job, right? So why do schools neglect this really important aspect of education? Don't you think that this is an important aspect of life? Skills that are necessary? So let's look at another area of life that is key to success and happiness of our children. And this is something a little more alarming. This is active shooter incidents. I also know that the rate of suicides have gone up significantly as well. And how many times have you heard of young children ages 12, 10, or even 8 years old committing suicide? Sometimes by accident, playing stupid, dangerous games that they learned at school, and other times because of the hell of bullying. It's really, really horrible. Now, there is a very, very small chance that your child will be shot or they will be hurt at school. I'm not using this to scare you in any way. I'm just pointing out that young people in this country are not okay. The behavior in our schools is getting worse and worse, and students' abilities to develop healthy relationships with people from all different demographics is being stunted. Even though they're conversing with people all different, it's still breaking down. It's horrible. So this is one of the top reasons that people homeschool. People ask me about how I socialize my children because they're not around children their own age, but that is the exact scenario that I think is unhealthy for kids, for my kids. And when is it that you learn a subject from someone who knows nothing about it? Does anyone think that's a good learning strategy? So as our children go through the system, and there are so many other detrimental social aspects that I just can't get into right now. So if you want to learn more, definitely check out Revealing School from Amazon. It is written from a Christian perspective, so just keep that in mind. It's very controversial, but there's some really good nuggets in there about the psychological effects of school on our children and the historical background. So definitely, if you are not Christian and you're reading the book, just maybe filter that other stuff out and just kind of take the research and the history and all that to heart. Okay, so anyways, as our kids go through the system, they can be permanently stunted socially, no matter what we do at home when they aren't in school. So I want to share a quick story that I heard in the news just last week, a few weeks ago actually. It was a couple of young men who were caught on camera. They were trying to rob an elderly man. And when they couldn't get anything from him, he didn't have any money to rob, they kicked him to the ground and they beat him up and they spat on him. And one of the men is facing felony charges. And guess whose son he was? The police chief's. And you know what the police chief said? Here is his direct quote. "It's difficult for us to comprehend how one of 3 kids who grew up with the same parents under the same roof, with the same rules and the same values and character could wander so far astray. We simply don't know why or how we got here." And that's what he said about his own son. Sure, there are lots of other factors about why kids reject everything their parents stand for, but I've heard this story time and time again, and no one points out the common thread. Let's think about it for a little bit. How many different authorities or sets of rules does your child have to decide to listen to at school? There are 3 main ones. Your kids can listen to the school's rules, they can listen to your rules, or they can listen to their peers. Can you serve 3 masters? There's a reason that most children don't choose to obey their parents. But we need to keep moving, so I'll come back to that later. All right. So this is the police chief. I'm sorry. Gotta skip through this one. I missed that one. I should have changed it. All right, so this is so incredibly sad. I think this is way sadder than the shootings, that our children are dying from a slow and painful addiction to unhealthy food and an unhealthy lifestyle. I'm totally guilty of this one. And I think that has a lot to do with the environment that children eat in. I was trained to eat as fast and as convenient as possible because the most important thing were my grades and what other people thought about me. I remember one day I brought my favorite dish to school. It was rice and veggies and meat prepared in an Asian sauce. For those of you who don't know me, my dad is Vietnamese, so I'm half Vietnamese, so I love Asian food. So I had this huge soft spot for it, and it was my favorite, so I brought it to school, and people were holding their nose and telling me it smelled like cat food and making fun of me, and so guess what? I never brought it to school again. Sad, I know, very sad. The amount of time that children get to eat, the pressure to eat, what others are eating, sleep deprivation, the lack of exercise and the lack of time spent outdoors, etc., all of that. It's so important. Fitness is so important to our well-being and our futures, and schools totally neglect this. In fact, they supply the addiction. So let's jump into the 5 steps, because this is what really sets homeschooling apart from any other type of educational system. It's not the academics. Although homeschoolers on average score more than 30 points higher than public schoolers, that's not as important as the first step of your homeschooling journey. So let's jump right in. Your first step of your homeschooling journey is your why. And this is the most important step. This is the step that you are going to fall back on and keep in the forefront of your mind when you hit rough spots, because you are going to hit rough spots. There's no doubt. There will be questions from your kids. There will be questions from your family. There'll be questions from from strangers. Okay, there'll be questions from yourself as you work out your journey, because there isn't a one-size-fits-all plan. Okay, so here's a quick look at our agenda. These are the 5 steps of homeschooling, of starting to homeschool. Your why is number 1. Number 2 is deschool. Number 3 is discipline. Number 4 is goals and routines. And number 5 is choosing a curriculum. If you stay with me till the end of the class, I'll get into a free resource for you that you can use to educate your kids from preschool to all the way to 5th grade. So this is so exciting, you guys. This is your first step. This is the most important thing. Okay, so I want you guys to think about what you want to teach your children. What's the most important thing? Okay, what is the point of your children's education? What is it supposed to accomplish? Have you guys thought about that? I want you to think of that right now in your head. Why you want to homeschool. What is so important about your children's education that you need to homeschool? Okay? I think we can all agree that we want our children to be happy. We want our kids not to struggle as much as us. We want them to do better. But how do we educate to ensure those things? What do our children need to know to have a successful life? And I'll tell you, it's not what the schools are teaching. That's what is wrong, even more than how they teach. It's what they teach. They're teaching the totally wrong things. I believe that there are 4 F's to fulfillment, and those are faith, family, finances, and fitness. Do you agree? Those are the most important aspects of your life, because they not only affect you long term, they also extend till after you're gone. Okay, so the first step to figure out this question, and school does that for you, okay? School figures out this question for you. What do you want your children to learn? The government decides what your children needs to learn and for what purpose. That's very interesting to think about. I'm not going to tell you the answer to that. I'm just going to let you think about that, okay? So this is my why, and yours could be totally different. I homeschool because I'm preparing my child for life as a happy, healthy adult. I'm making sure that they're trained in the 4 F's of fulfillment, and I want to give them the best chance at life that they could possibly have. And most schools just don't, or they can't do that. And when I got out of high school, the main things that I used were taught to me by my parents. How to make deposits and withdrawals at the bank, how to cook, how to write a check, how to navigate around a new town. And there were a lot of things I didn't learn because my parents just didn't have time to teach me those things. You know, like how everything really costs, how much everything really costs, and how to cook a variety of healthy things, how to live with my friends and communicate rules and rituals that helped us get along better, how to defend my beliefs and communicate my thoughts effectively to my peers. So once you've figured out your cornerstone, your why behind the motivation to homeschool, our next step of homeschooling is deschooling. And I want you to imagine that everything you know about school is on a piece of paper. And I want you to take that piece of paper and I want you to crinkle it up and I want you to throw it in the fire, okay? Just pretend you don't know anything about school, all right? I know this seems silly, but if we don't evaluate what we know and why we think the way we do, we will get stuck in the same ruts over and over instead of changing for the better. We'll do what we know because that's comfortable. So, like I said in the beginning, if you had something you didn't like at a restaurant, would you ask for the recipe? When I first started homeschooling, I made this mistake. I actually started my own preschool because I thought it would help my kids get the socialization skills and I could make a little extra money. And let me tell you, the results were a huge confirmation of why I didn't want to put my kids in school. Because even though I didn't have that many kids, the atmosphere was set by the lowest common denominator. So if there was one child who was not listening, not wanting to do what I wanted, you know, who was bored with something and it didn't interest him, the whole environment was thrown off. Sorry. That means that the other kids weren't getting as much out of it because I couldn't discipline properly because they weren't my kids, for one. And also, you know, what I would do for my kids would be totally different from what I would do for someone else's kids, right? So that took away from my own children. And the first step in deschooling is to throw out everything you remember doing in school. Did you dress up like pilgrims and make tons of crafts? Did reading and writing come easy to you? Did you do a lot of math drills and kills? This doesn't mean that you shouldn't do those things or have high expectations for your kids. This just means that you need to let go of recreating school at home. There is no reason to do that because the results have already shown that what they do at school doesn't work. So we should not recreate that. And here's why. Okay? Let's jump into educating the whole child. And this is what schools can't do. They cannot educate the whole child. And what do I mean by that? They can't fully develop the body, mind, and spirit. And this is so important. So let me give you an example. We decided to get a membership at the YMCA, and the kids needed some swimming lessons, but the Y also happened to have a rock climbing wall, which is really fun. And the first time I set my 4-year-old up it, he got about 6 feet. I could still touch him, and he just froze, and he couldn't move. He was so afraid. He's so petrified. Okay, and this wasn't because he couldn't physically climb the wall, because he got up 6 feet just fine. This was because his spirit faltered. His body and his mind, they knew how to climb the wall, but the fear of being up so high was something he hadn't experienced, and he didn't know how to work through that fear. His spirit faltered. Not for long, though. He climbed that wall, and he kept working on it. We kept encouraging him, and he got farther and farther up the wall until he finally reached the bell at the very top. And you guys, this is a really tall wall. I'm pretty sure it was like 30 feet. It was pretty tall. I climbed up it and I was scared. So you know it was tall. So you see, our children are not standard. They're not robots. There are so many different dynamics to them. And allowing our children to use their bodies to learn is something that schools just can't logistically do. And the opportunity for our children to test their spirits, like climbing a rock wall or going off the high dive or speaking in front of people, is not a high priority in school. Even the mind is trained mostly on following directions, fact memorization, and regurgitation in school. What about exercises that test their focus? What about problems that use logical and critical thinking? What about developing healthy habits like positive self-talk, prayer or meditation, and creative expression? There is no school like this, and there are also few homeschoolers that actively put these things into their curriculum. Training the body, mind, and spirit is the most important thing you can do in the education of your child. All three are required if you want success, if you want something different from what the schools offer. And this is like character training, but not exactly, okay? I get a lot of moms who say they do character training, and they talk a lot about generosity and kindness and honesty and courage and all these different things, okay? And their kids memorize scripture or they memorize phrases about these things. But when it comes down to it, you're just educating the mind. What about their body? What about their spirit? Can they skip a meal for a good cause? Can they kill a spider that might hurt their baby brother or sister? Can they go for a hike for 2 miles without complaining? Can they keep their room clean without you asking? Can they master a monotonous skill like a chore or a simple hobby? I remember when I did my first webinar, I was so nervous. My first real class. I did all the right things. I got my slides ready. I had my ads in place, but I had to practice. And we need to get the idea out of our heads that education is limited to something we do with a book, paper, and pencil. We need to give our kids ways to practice mastering their body, mind, and spirit, and to control them for good and better things. So our next step of homeschooling, it has a lot to do with educating the whole child. It is discipline. Discipline is so important, you guys. I cannot stress this enough. So many people think of discipline as a bad thing, a negative, but it is such an important part of education. And I think everyone misses this because it is so freeing when you really understand what discipline is. When my preschool started, I did everything Pinterest perfect. Seriously, I did. I had all my lesson plans. I had every minute of the day mapped out. And while those things are fine to do, there was just something missing. I had this expectation of a perfect school day, just like thousands of homeschool moms have when they map out their day. But when it gets right down to it, they burn out. Because guess what the reality is? Yep, that right there. The fighting and the whining and the flat out refusal to do anything. Maybe the first few weeks will go really well and then you'll have this lull, or maybe it's rough from the start. Instead of stopping and evaluating their technique, a lot of moms just quit and send their kids to school because it's just easier. It is easier, okay, to let the reins go and just hand them over to someone else. But that doesn't give us the deep, lasting relationship, that doesn't give us more freedom to go where we want, when we want, or take the time to really live in the moment when we need to. And it doesn't allow us to pass on what it is important to us, to our children. And don't forget those statistics I shared at the beginning. Can you guys give me one of those? Can you guys think of those? Lots of parents think they can foster a good relationship with their children on the weekends, but it just doesn't work that way. Remember the 3 authorities that your children have to choose between each day they're at school. And this really has to do with discipline. Are kids more afraid of the discipline of school? Are they afraid of the discipline of you? Or are they afraid of the discipline of their peers? School is a very unruly place. There is no way a teacher with 15 or more of the same age children can discipline properly because of a lack of manpower, supervision, and the time it takes. I know. I was not a very nice student when I didn't like the teacher or when I thought I could impress my peers. So even if you enact the strictest punishment you can think of for disobedience for the kids that go to school, you would never want to abuse your child, right? Well, guess who will abuse them? Children will choose to listen to their peers because their peers can inflict emotional, physical, and psychological abuse that is way worse than anything that we would want to do to our kids. And that lack of discipline in schools creates this bully culture that we see permeating in the news. It's not a lack of niceness training. Everyone knows how to be nice, right? Kids know how to make friends. But when there's a lack of discipline, kids are free to do what they want and what they feel like. It's easier not to control yourself and do whatever you want, right? Self-control is key to this step. When children have self-control, they have trained their body, mind, and spirit to do what is right under pressure. And we as parents have the opportunity to give this amazing gift to our children, and that is through rewards and punishments. And of course, inspiration. Inspiration is like the little pep talks we give our children after they have accepted our discipline and our authority. It's giving them room to dream big, and this is going to carry on into their adult lives. They'll have more self-control when spending and saving money. They'll have more self-control in their relationships. They'll have more self-control with food. And they'll have more self-control when it comes to moral situations. And do you guys see what I just did there? I just covered those 4 F's of fulfillment. Okay, so discipline is so important. It's so amazingly positive for your kids. As far as discipline goes, I highly recommend the stove method. Have you guys heard of that? It's simple and effective, and it takes the emotion out of it, okay? So simply pretend to be a stove. You lay down the rules and your rewards for your homeschool, and you follow those through, just like the stove. If you touch it when it's hot, you get burned. You don't blame the stove, you blame yourself for the burn because you should have been more careful. You might yell and throw a fit at first, but you're never mad at the stove, okay? You respect it. No, I'm not telling you to burn your children. That is absolutely horrible, okay? But I'm just talking about being consistent and being strict when you lay down the law, okay? That's what you have to do with discipline, and you need to establish this for your homeschool to go smoothly and with more success. And don't think I have this down pat. No, I don't. It's definitely a day-to-day struggle, but if our children do not have self-control, if they are disrespectful to us and our rules, we need to nip that in the bud before we get started on academics, okay? This is way more important than anything else they're going to learn from a book. So we really need to get this down. Here's another way you can help with self-control, and it's the next step of our agenda. It is goals. You guys, this is so fun when you do it with your kids because they know how to dream big. And their routines, and they know how to dream really big. And routines are going to help them create healthy habits. Habits that would otherwise be created in public school. And, you know, the common ones that you might be used to when the bell rings, learning time is done, right? Because the bell is way more important than anything you're going to learn, right? Or cheating on your homework. You can't ask for or work with any of your friends for the answers because that would be cheating. Or how about reading? You read it in, you read short little abbreviated versions of a story, and it's so dull and boring, you never want to read again. Okay, so those are some of the habits that maybe our schools are teaching the kids. And we don't want those habits for them, do we? No. No, we want goals and routines that are going to propel them to the next level of success. And the first step to these goals and routines is believing. We need to believe in our children, we need to believe in ourselves, and we need to believe in the process. And schools just don't do this. They don't. They categorize, they label, they give grades, and that's to help them manage the mob and be as efficient as possible. But that doesn't serve our individual children, does it? I know this sounds cheesy, but really, you guys, your kids have this magical power. They have this magical power inside them. They really do. Maybe you've heard this story from one of my other talks, but I'm going to tell it again because it's so powerful. My husband called my son up to his office one day, and you could tell Colton thought he was in trouble because he had this look on his face that said, "Oh, I'm innocent, don't punish me." So my husband drew him close and whispered into his ear, and I know Colton didn't expect this at all. But my husband said, "You are going to be a king someday." And guess what my son did? He said, "Yep." My husband told him not to tell anybody, but he immediately came downstairs and pulled me aside and whispered in my ear, "I'm going to be a king someday." My son believed him. And you might think this is cute, but it's really not. It's powerful. Kids have inner confidence that can propel them to do things that adults are afraid to do. And sometimes the biggest problem is that we don't believe in them. We can't imagine these little creatures that we wiped in the bathroom are extremely intelligent, but they are, every single one of them. They learn a foreign language in their first few years of life without reading or studying or any special lessons, and while learning a million other things. We need to believe in our kids. We need to believe in ourselves. We need to believe that what we do with our kids matters, because it matters way more than most of us realize. So sit down with your kids and ask them about their goals. Talk with them about what your goals are for them and why. You're the parent, you might have some insight on what goals they should pursue, because most kid wants to do everything, right? Don't write off goals that are really big, because that's going to be a great learning experience for them if they don't hit those goals. Most people don't even think about what they want and how they can get there. So this is going to give your kids an amazing head start. And don't just flirt with their goals. Talk to them about the actions they're going to need to take to put them in their routine. So let's talk about schedules, because you definitely want to have one. Things are going to go smoother when you make plans. Everyone does something different, but what I don't want you to do is to block out 6 hours and have every single minute planned out to the T. That's going to stress you out and make for a really rigid plan that your child will end up dreading. Okay? Old habits die hard. They really do. And that's what school does. They have everything mapped out for the child. They tell them what, when, where, how, and I think that really hinders your child's decision-making process. It hinders their self-control. It hinders their self-responsibility. And it doesn't help them learn to manage time. So what I do recommend is coming up with a routine. Get your kids doing the same types of things around the same time each day, and reward them when they stick to the routine, and have a punishment for when they don't. For example, when they wake up, when we wake up, we get ready for the day. Okay, sorry, no pajamas in my homeschool, unless it's a reward or it's a special day. We want our kids to be alert. We want our kids to be alert and get up with a purpose. We want them to get dressed because they have important things to do. Then we do our morning chores and eat breakfast as a family while we read aloud. After breakfast, we clean up, and then it is on to our homeschool routine. We don't start our homeschool routine until we have our other work done, and if it isn't done, then we don't start schooling, because study time is a privilege. It's special. And it's great because I'm teaching them first things first, okay? So that's our morning routine. And your routine is going to look different from mine because you have a totally different family dynamic. But if you set things up that you get done in order, so if you have things that you do in a certain order, the day will run smoothly, and at the same time, you're teaching, so many different character development traits. For class, our kids have a lot of say in what they get to do, but we block out time they get to do class and reward them for the work. And they get done with screen time and other privileges. If they don't get done, then they miss out on those privileges. As homeschoolers, we have the ability to let our children go at their own pace, and so we don't have to dictate what they need to get done, just that they need to work on these skills in order to accomplish their goals. And this is probably the hardest thing to do because we want them to learn all the things right away, right? We think we have to be on par with public school children, but in reality, no matter how behind they are in math, reading, writing, and spelling, they will catch up to those kids on their own time while learning so much more and about other things that are way more important. They will have more confidence, and if you aren't comparing them, you know what I mean? Comparing them to other kids. So don't get me wrong, there's definitely a time to push them and coach them to learn certain things within a certain time frame, but it's more about self-improvement and inspiration. And I could say so much more about all these things, but we don't have time for that. So let's get going with the next one. This is everyone's favorite part. It's choosing a curriculum. And I am not going to tell you what curriculum to choose, but I am going to tell you some tips on how to choose one, okay? That's going to work for your family. So when you're looking for a curriculum, you want it to be simple. If it looks messy, then it's going to be a lot of work to set up and a lot of work to clean up. I really like books that have the work and the explanations in the same book. So there's no separate book for the teacher. It's just open the book and there's the lessons right there. This means there's less books, there's less mess, less of everything. I love that. So choose something that's going to be really easy to teach. Schools make this so hard by trying to introduce all these different learning styles and class management techniques. They overcomplicate math because they're trying to cover every single way you can do a problem, so that the kids who don't understand one way might understand by doing this other way. But the other children who already know have to suffer through doing busy work because they already understand. So if you can guess, I'm not a big fan of the letter of the week. I just can't teach a letter for a whole week. Yikes, right? If it's easy to teach, it's going to be easier for our kids to learn. So if there's a lot of extra work, it's going to be difficult for them to actually learn. So you could do a whole week of A and they could just not remember it because they're remembering cutting and coloring and pasting and all these other things that they totally skip over the main point of the lesson. So also, I'm going to point out really quick, reading aloud. I teach a whole class on reading aloud, but I'm not going to go into all the details. Reading aloud in your homeschool is going to increase your child's focus, their attention span, their vocabulary, their comprehension, and so much more. So your curricula really can be as easy as going to the library, especially once your children can read on their own. If you can teach your child to read well, and if you can develop a love for books early, then everything else will follow very naturally. My next tip, is to pick a curriculum that you could potentially use for the next child so that you don't have to purchase it again, or even something that can be used for multiple age groups. Avoid really immature looking curriculum. If one of your children learns at a slower pace, he or she is not going to want to use something that looks like it is meant for a really young child. And also, young children don't learn better from bright, distracting characters. So maybe it's supposed to be fun, but that doesn't mean it's going to be better. It's going to teach your child better. than something that's more simple and less eye-catching. So you can make it fun in other ways, like rewards or tickling or having them teach you, or just being excited about what they're learning. Okay, being excited yourself. My next tip is to embrace digital tools. For some reason, homeschoolers are really reluctant to do this. I know there are a lot of scary statistics out there about technology use, and some of it is true, but the key is balance. Also, not all technology is equal. Social media, video games, streaming cartoons, those are not the same things as certain simple learning apps. Audiobooks, educational videos, coding lessons, online academies, okay, they aren't the same. Not only that, technology is the future. More and more jobs, opportunities, information is going to be available to those who know how to use and manipulate digital technology. So don't discount using technology in your homeschool. You've heard it before, no matter what book a child reads, it's good for them. That's obviously just not true. My mom, bless her heart, she thought this too, and so she let me read whatever I wanted. And while my skill was really good, I picked up a lot of questionable material. And one book series was so captivating, I read it religiously. I just brought the books everywhere with me. They were like 800 pages each book, and they were my escape. But little did I know that they weren't helping me with the stress of daily life. I was trying to get away from the stress, but really they were, you know, making me more anxious because of all of the horrible stuff that was in them. And these books weren't teaching me anything good. So, you know, I got all the anxiety, and I also got all these weird ideas in my head. They also gave me violent nightmares and depression. I attributed to movies, but now looking back, I remember a dream that haunted me that I kept having, and it was from a book that I read. This was me at 13 or 14, okay? So I would wake up in the middle of the night and just have sweats, and I was screaming one time. It was horrible. So not only was I reading these horrible books, but I also was skipping over these amazing books, these classics, okay? And a classic is a book that appeals to all people in all times, and that overcome nearly all barriers, national, cultural, generational. Okay, we have a bunch of these audio classics on Blue Manor. And one of those is The Velveteen Rabbit. And I had never read it. So the first time I read it was listening to it on Blue Manor, and it was so beautiful that I kind of teared up. And my kids were so cute. They noticed me being sad, and they were comforting me and telling me not to be sad. They had already listened to the book, so they knew the story. But anyways, classics are classics for a reason. Classics are classics for a reason, okay? They are so great, and there's so many of them for children of all ages. You can hit two birds in one stone by using them for writing, grammar, spelling, and reading and doing copy work, highlighting the grammar, choosing words from a passage for spelling. All of that you can use the classics for your main reading curricula. Sorry. Okay, last tip. Help your children develop marketable skills. These are things that they're going to use at a job, and most people will wait until college to do this, but childhood is the perfect time. Most people who are 18 feel this is overwhelming, and it's just something that they're not ready for. They have to get a job, they have to pay bills, they have to do more school, and, you know, just what they want to do. And what does that do for them? Most people don't even use their degree, and they simply have more debt to show for it. So what if your child started testing the waters right now? What if you help them learn a skill that they can potentially use to get an amazing job at 18? It could be art, typing, coding, agriculture, writing, horse training, business, tutoring, websites, photography, baking, construction, even hobbies like knitting, sewing, woodworking. The point is to help your child master something they like to do, and no one can touch their skill because they will have worked so many years on it, right? And it's not just about developing those skills, but about giving them business skills to market what they have, to market the skills that they have. Okay? And there's just no beating homeschoolers. If you teach a child to draw or to paint when they're 6 and they work on it until they're 18, they're going to be amazing. They're going to be awesome. Okay, so communication, finance, and bringing their skills to market is also a part of this aspect. So it's easy as that, you guys. I really hope that after you start homeschooling, you will use some of these steps each year to kind of reevaluate your why and critically look at how you're doing things in your homeschool. Establishing discipline, obviously, appropriate for the age of your child, and providing an easy routine and recording goals and improvement, and then choosing a curriculum that's simple, multi-level, and that embraces new technology and new information. I hope you guys learned a ton today and have more confidence as you go on and choose whether you homeschool or not, or if you are homeschooling in your next homeschool year. If you have any questions, you can email us or contact us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to access 100 free books, you can go to bluemanoracademy.com and access 100 audiobooks for free. You just want to click you'll scroll down, you'll watch the video because it's very good, and it'll show you how to create an account. And then you'll scroll down and there'll be an orange button saying sign up, and you'll want to sign up there. And that will help you get some free curriculum for your new homeschool. Thanks so much for joining me, you guys. I hope that you learned tons, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.